a New York City hotel. The sound of violins and pianos echoed through the classical grand hall. The YouTube live stream of the ceremony hit over 3 million views within just 10 minutes. Julian Blackwood, the 33-year-old CEO of Blackwood Global, stood before an altar adorned with white flowers, his face frozen as he watched Selina Carter, his bride, approach, in a couture wedding gown and a veil covering her entire face. It wasn't until she stood before him that Julian noticed something shocking. The deep eyes, the brown skin along her jawline. Not the woman from the approved selection of photos his family had shown him. "This can't be," Julian whispered. He didn't dare lift the veil. His whole body froze as a question erupted. Have they deceived me? Seated in the front row, his father, Mr. Donovan Blackwood, wore a stern expression. His face remained composed, as if everything had been meticulously planned. Julian recognized the look in his father's eyes. A silent command. "Don't let this fall apart." He clenched his jaw, nodded stiffly, and the ceremony began. 15 minutes later, as the hall applauded after the words, "You may now kiss the bride," Julian lifted the veil. She stood still. Her face wasn't caked in glamour or gloss, only a calm, unreadable expression. Her eyes were wet, as if silently saying, "I'm sorry, I'm not who you expected." Julian, speechless, kissed her on the cheek, a gesture that felt more legal than romantic, then took her hand and stepped down from the altar. From that moment, he knew his life would never be the same again. The couple's private suite after the ceremony. Silence. Julian was the first to break it. "Who are you?" She removed her gown and answered clearly. "I'm Selina Carter, the only daughter of Franklin Carter. And I'm not the woman in the photos your family selected. I was hidden because I'm a black woman, because I don't fit the mold of the perfect heiress." Julian looked at her, then at himself in the mirror. A man orchestrated from beginning to end, cast as the ideal CEO, the groom in a live-streamed wedding, and now as the husband to a stranger. But at that moment, instead of rage engine, what he felt was curiosity. The warm, golden lights of the lavish bridal suite did little to soothe the storm rising inside Julian Blackwood. As the door shut behind them, sealing off the cheers and congratulations from the outside world, he spun around, eyes blazing at the woman who had become his legal wife just minutes ago. "Who are you?" he nearly growled. His voice kept just low enough not to be overheard. "The girl in the photo isn't you. Why? Why this entire charade?" Selina Carter, still in her pristine white wedding gown, and the veil recently lifted at the altar, didn't blink. Though she had just endured a ceremony swarmed by media and hundreds of watchful eyes, she stood firm, gaze unwavering, as she faced the man seething before her. "My name is Selina Carter," she said, voice low and clear. "Daughter of Franklin Carter. The person your family thought you were marrying is me." Julian scoffed, his sarcasm sharp and unconcealed. "Oh, really? And the pictures, the virtual meetings, the professional profiles I was introduced to, they were hired models, arranged by my father and yours. They didn't believe you would agree to marry me once you saw who I was." A long pause followed. Not because Julian had nothing to say, but because Selina's words cut deeper than the initial shock. This wasn't just deception. It was the revelation that his parents, Donovan and Margaret Blackwood, had so little faith in him that they assumed he'd reject a woman based solely on the color of her skin. "And you went along with this?" Julian asked, voice thick. "You played your part in this scam without resistance?" Selina clasped her hands tightly. The answer wasn't simple. "I didn't want to. I told my father it was a disgusting trick, but he said if I didn't go through with it, the company would lose its last chance to survive after 3/4 of losses. What if I wanted to stay on as head of development? I had to do my duty as a Carter. And that duty was to fake your identity to secure a billion-dollar merger." Julian stepped back, the fire in his eyes now tinged with disappointment. Pathetic. You think I'm not disgusted too? Selina snapped back, her composure cracking for the first time. You think I wanted to walk down that aisle, hear the whispers about my skin, see you looking at me like I was a con artist? I'm a victim too. And my silence wasn't agreement, it was survival. Julian froze. In the dim light, Selina's eyes now clearly reflected pain. Not the pain of someone rejected, but of someone who had repeatedly sacrificed herself to survive in her family in the tech industry, in a world where leadership roles for Black women were always viewed as symbolic at best. I didn't hide who I was to manipulate you, she continued. I hid because they made me believe there was no other option. Julian sat down on the sofa, head in his hands. Images from the past few weeks flashed before him like film reels, tense meetings with his father, the pressure to rush the wedding, the cryptic whispers between families about maintaining a flawless public image. Everything was now painfully apparent. So, what now, he asked after a long silence. We're married. The media aired it live. Headlines are everywhere. If I file for annulment, the market crashes. Selina nodded. Stock prices will plummet. Investors will pull out. Both Carter Tech and Blackwood Global could be revalued. Thousands could lose their jobs. Julian looked at her. His gaze had softened, weary now. So what do you propose? A deep breath. We make a contract, Selina said. Pretend to be married for 2 years, paper marriage, no emotional ties. We slowly pull financial control out of our parents' hands during that time. Rebuild from within. Julian raised an eyebrow. You just walked out of a fake wedding and want to form a strategic alliance. Selina smirked slightly, a hint of irony in her voice for the first time. You're a CEO. No one understands temporary alliances to preserve shareholder value better than you. Julian laughed a tired, hollow laugh. But something flickered in his eyes. So he said, rising and stepping toward her. From forced spouses to allies, against our families, against the entire upper echelon that mapped out our lives. Selina extended her hand. I don't expect you to trust me yet, but let's start by not seeing each other as enemies. Julian looked at her hand in silence. Then he took it. Her hand was cold, but her grip was firm. 2-year agreement, he confirmed. 2-year agreement, Selina repeated. And after that, if we want to walk away, we can. But at least that time the choice will be ours. An arranged marriage had created 2 reluctant allies. But from this point on, a fragile seed of trust was planted. In the darkness of deception, a small light made of honesty and empathy had been lit. The next morning, Blackwood Global's communications office released an official statement. The wedding of Julian Blackwood and Selina Carter was a success, marking a strategic milestone in the merger of 2 leading tech empires. No one knew that beyond the extravagant ceremony, another contract had been made, not by lawyers, but by a quiet handshake between 2 individuals trying to hold on to control over their own lives. In the temporary Midtown penthouse, Julian stood in the kitchen making 2 cups of coffee. Selina appeared from the guest bedroom, still in an oversized sweater and sweatpants, face, makeup-free, but more striking than any screen-ready look. We need to set a few ground rules, she said, pulling out a chair at the dining table. If we're going to live together for 2 years. Julian handed her a cup and then sat across from her. I'm listening. CEO agreement between 2 unwilling partners. Selina glanced at him, lips tightening a faint smile. Rule 1. No interference in personal lives unless it affects the media. Agreed, Julian nodded. Rule 2. Appear together in necessary public events, but no need to perform when there's no press. Good. I don't like pretending either. Rule 3. She paused. We tell the truth to each other, at least in this room. Julian looked at her momentarily stunned. He hadn't expected that. Not performance, not manipulation, but a request for honesty. That's harder than it sounds, he admitted. I've spent half my life playing a role. So have I, Selina said quietly. The only difference is, I didn't get to choose mine. They began living like co-founders, sharing equity. The schedule was intense merger meetings, legal consultations, and media management. But every night when the apartment was quiet, they'd sit across from each other, a glass of wine or hot tea in hand, and talk not as business partners, but as two people trying to navigate a wreckage disguised as luxury suits and gala gowns. One night, as Julian edited a media strategy deck, Selina walked out of the study with a stack of documents. I sent the pitch for the new NeuroAid product, she said. But your marketing team over-edited. They removed the part about social impact. I kept only the revenue growth bits. Called it message refinement. Julian frowned. That team works like my father, optimize market share, ignore depth. Selina sat beside him, placing the folder on the table. I'm not against business, she said slowly. But if everything boils down to profit, how are we different from the generation we claim we're trying to move beyond? Julian looked at her. At that moment, a deeper meaning behind the pact emerged. It wasn't just about preventing corporate collapse, but about salvaging whatever humanity they still had. In the third week, they moved into the central penthouse, sleek, modern, cold, and glass and concrete. Selina began bringing in plants, books, and a few keepsakes from her mother. Julian didn't object. He even helped hang a small framed quote from her old office, a line from Audre Lorde. Caring for myself is not self-indulgence, it is self-preservation. I didn't think CEOs put poetry on their walls, Julian joked. I didn't think you'd marry a black woman either. Did you? She replied, half teasing, half sharp. Julian laughed, but then grew quiet. I used to think like that, not consciously, but maybe because I never had to face being judged by skin or heritage. I thought I wasn't racist, but maybe that's because I never had to feel racism. Selina looked up, not with resentment, but with surprise. It's an honest admission for the first time. One morning, as they were having breakfast, Julian got a text from Marcus, his personal attorney and college best friend. Your father just sent a new NDA draft for Selina. Wants to limit her public representation in the merger. Julian's expression darkened. He thinks she's just a diversity mascot. For the annual report, Selina took a sip of coffee, eyes calm but sharp. I expected this move. I'll fight back with metrics and real results. No need to shout. Julian looked at her, then nodded. If you need someone standing beside you in that meeting, I'll be there. Really? Selina asked, caught off guard. We signed a pact, Julian said, and allies don't stand behind. By the end of the first month, they were no longer strangers. They weren't in love. They didn't fully trust each other. But something had begun to grow quietly between them. Respect. Not for titles, but for the scars they admitted to each other without justification. And in the seemingly trivial things, a hand offering coffee each morning, a silent glance during boardroom debates, a bond began to form. It was not built on promises of love, but forged through the silent oath of comradeship between two people once crushed by the system. Outside, the market watched every step of the million-dollar couple. Inside, a quiet revolution had begun, not to save a marriage, but to build a future where choice would no longer be dictated by race, gender, or bloodline. Was CEO Julian Blackwood tricked into marriage? Real bride. Fake engagement photos. A Wall Street wedding scandal. Front page headline of the New York Herald 3 weeks after the wedding. That morning, Selina woke up to chaos in the living room. The TV was blasting a breaking news segment, the reporter's voice pouring out fast and urgent. Insider sources reveal that the engagement photo circulated before the wedding was not of Selina Carter, but of an unnamed model hired to reassure shareholders before the merger went through. Julian stood there, one hand gripping the back of a chair, the other furiously tapping on his phone. Marcus is on it. The press has found the original image of the model my father hired. Now the headlines are questioning whether I was set up. Selina crossed her arms, her eyes darkening. Perfect. Now I'm the imposter. In my marriage. Social media exploded. The hashtag #FauxBride climbed into the global top 5 on Twitter. On LinkedIn, a financial columnist posted, "Why should investors worry if a CEO can't even control his wedding photos?" Minority shareholders sent letters demanding a reevaluation of Julian Blackwood's leadership capacity during the merger. Blackwood Global's stock dropped 4% within 12 hours. In an emergency internal meeting, Selina walked in wearing a sharp black suit, her hair pulled into a high bun, her eyes cold as blades. Across from her, the PR team nervously presented a proposed strategy to temporarily pull Selina from media appearances to minimize brand damage. "What exactly are you suggesting?" she asked. "That I disappear from the company I co-lead because I don't fit the image you've conveniently pre-designed." The head of PR mumbled, "We're just trying to protect the market share." Selina turned to Julian. Choose Julian. Optics or reality? The one who unexpectedly spoke up was Marcus Chen, Julian's longtime friend and legal advisor, usually silent in the background. "We're evaluating a future CEO not by her qualifications, but by her skin color. That's not protecting the market. That's protecting bias." Silence fell. Marcus stepped forward, voice steady. "Let me remind you, Selina Carter formerly led the development of Carter Technologies' medical operating system, secured 4 patents, and expanded healthcare tech into 3 Asian markets. If that's not brand aligned, the problem lies with the brand, not with her." Julian stood. "Thank you, Marcus. And to be clear, she's not going anywhere. We're doing a live interview with CNBC this Friday. Together." Meanwhile, something unexpected was happening online. Selina's personal media strategist, Dana Morales, launched a counter-strike campaign. She connected with racial equity organizations, female founder groups, and Black startup communities. Within 48 hours, a wave of support swept through the web. She's not a fake bride. She's a real leader. Selina Carter. From media blackout to tech reform champion. A Black woman standing tall among white boardrooms, and still standing strong. A new hashtag emerged. She is the CEO. From LinkedIn to TikTok, thousands of posts supporting Selina spread. One former employee from Carter Tech wrote, "She once fought to protect us from an unfair layoff. If I had to choose a CEO for the next generation, I'd choose Selina." Julian and Selina sat under the studio lights during the live CNBC interview. The host asked bluntly, "Do you feel betrayed? Julian, finding out the woman you married wasn't the one in the pictures?" Julian looked straight into the camera. "I do feel betrayed, but not by Selina. I feel betrayed by the people who thought I needed to be convinced to accept a woman who is brilliant, intense, and Black. And to all the shareholders watching, I was not deceived. I am co-leading one of the most significant mergers of the decade. And the woman beside me is not just my wife, my strategic partner. She has the vision that both our empires need." Selina took Julian's hand for the first time on camera. Not as a media couple, but as 2 people fighting the same war. Immediately after the interview, Blackwood's stock rose 3%. Carter Tech was invited to present its new product at the World Economic Forum. As Selina exited the studio, she looked at Julian. "We just won a round, but the war isn't over." Julian nodded. "I know, but at least now they don't think you're the mystery bride anymore." Selina turned to Marcus and Dana. "Thank you both. Looks like this squad works." Marcus shrugged. "Who said you were the only smart one in the room?" In a world where the old guard still defines appearance, race, and pedigree, Selina Carter rewrote the meaning of fit. through action, through intellect, and her unapologetic existence. Laurel Mountains, Vermont. A wooden cabin nestled among pine trees. Cold night. Rain pounded heavily against the tin roof. Julian unlocked the door. This was what he had called his last refuge since college. No network, no signal, no press, no board members tracking him down. Selina shivered beneath her thick coat. The Range Rover that brought them here had gotten lost in the forest rain for nearly 2 hours. They hadn't come for love, only for a 2-day retreat to lay low while the media storm swirled post-CNBC interview. "Welcome to Julian Blackwood's secret lair," he said, half-joking. Selina stepped inside, taking in the dusty wooden interior, old books, and technical sketches spread across a makeshift drafting table. "Not bad for a runaway billionaire," she said, pulling off her scarf. "But it could use a fireplace." Julian turned on the heater and poured hot tea. "It's the only place I feel like a person." As the heavy rain poured down, they sat silently on opposite ends of the couch near the fireplace. Selina stared at the bookshelf. A folded architectural drawing lay buried under dusty reports. "You drew this?" she asked, lifting it gently. Julian nodded slowly. "Before my father shoved me into finance, I wanted to be an architect." "This cabin too?" "Yeah. I built it with my own hands. Not a single brick touched by the Blackwood name." Selina looked at him for a long moment. "You had a dream, and they crushed it." Julian offered a bitter smile. "What about you? Ever want something beyond being Carter Tech's backup CEO?" She didn't answer right away. She turned to the fire silent before quietly saying, "I wanted to be a teacher." Julian looked surprised. "A math teacher for blind children," she added. "When I was little, I had a cousin who lost her sight. Learning for her meant rigid braille boards. I always wondered why couldn't tech make it easier." She ran a finger along the seam of a throw pillow. "But my father had other plans. He said, 'This family doesn't make teachers, we make world shapers.'" Thunder rumbled outside. Inside, the silence deepened. "So that neuro-assistive tech project is the only part of that old dream I've managed to hold on to," she cut in. "It's not a side project like my father called it. It's the reason I've endured all of this." Julian sighed, leaning back into the couch. "It's insane. We are forced to give up who we are because of dreams built by people who forgot what real dreams look like. Maybe we're the last generation willing to accept that," Selina whispered. "Or the first brave enough to refuse." That night, they sat for hours in the dim cabin, sharing stories absent from any shareholder report. Julian told her about turning down a Yale architecture scholarship to go to Harvard for his father, about submitting a blueprint for a community shelter for people experiencing homelessness, only to have his father dismiss it with, "You were born to build empires, not homes for the poor." Selina shared her first pitch on a voice-guided navigation app edited by her father's PR team to sound less sensitive. They laughed. They raged. They went quiet. Then I laughed again because it all felt too absurd. "I used to think you were playing a long con," Julian admitted. "At the wedding, when I lifted that veil and saw you, not the woman in the photos, my shock wasn't about how you looked. It was realizing I was the last to know the truth." Selina turned to him, eyes brown and steady. "And I thought you were a perfect clone of the old guard. Cold, arrogant, colorblind to reality." They looked at each other not to accuse but to see clearly. Julian set his tea down. "But now, I think, maybe we're not victims. Maybe we're the last chance to set this straight. Not just for our parents," Selina added, "but for the system they still cling to." Rain continued. In the firelight, two faces softened. No masks, no posing. Two people once forced apart now see something real in each other. Selina rose and walked to the window, staring at the dense forest. "Julian," she whispered, "if we do nothing, one day our children could be forced into a marriage like ours, in the shadows of someone else's dream." Julian came beside her. He didn't touch her, just stood there parallel. "Then let's start here," he said. "We rewrite the rules, not with money, not with contracts, but with truth." A bolt of lightning lit up the sky. But the cabin was no longer just a place to hide. It had become the birthplace of a vow. They wouldn't just live together as a contract-bound couple. They would fight two young people standing at the edge of a world that needed to change. Langston Hotel, Manhattan. Annual Global Young Leaders Gala spotlights beamed from every angle. The dance floor shimmered with polished wood. Applause, champagne flutes, and polite smiles from the financial elite filled the grand ballroom. Julian Blackwood and Selina Carter, the couple whose every move had been tracked by the media for the past 2 weeks, descended the main staircase in elegant evening wear, walking side by side, as if they were the embodiment of next-generation power. Cameras flashed. The MC of the event announced, "And here they are, the two young figures redefining what it means to have a strategic marriage in tech." Selina stepped onto the red carpet, her smile impeccably measured. In her mind, echoed Julian's words from the car ride over. "We must build a story, a transition from arranged marriage to genuine connection. They want to see emotional progress. We'll give it to them. Give." The dance steps, fleeting touches, and glances were all choreographed to perfection. Julian held out his hand. "Shall we waltz?" Selina placed hers in his. "As long as you don't step on my feet like last time." "That was the shoes, not me." He chuckled. "We're doing well tonight." "Yeah, almost like a real couple in love." His hand rested lightly on her waist. They spun across the floor like characters in a staged play. But then, during a quiet lull in the music, Julian looked at Selina, not as a CEO or brand partner, but as the woman who once argued with him for 3 days straight about how to pronounce infrastructure, and who made porridge for him after a post-meeting fever. "Are you starting to confuse the real and the fake?" he asked softly as they spun past the spotlight. Selina paused slightly. "Are you talking about this dance, or everything?" Julian didn't answer. He just held her hand tighter. Backstage, Selina's assistant Nadine whispered to Marcus, Chen Julian's legal advisor, "She's falling for him. I saw it when she fixed his tie. 3 times. He is too." Marcus nodded. "Julian never looks at anyone for more than 5 seconds. With her, it's 10. In the ballroom, what was meant to be a backdrop for a fabricated performance turned into a trial of emotional truth. After the dance, a CNBC reporter approached them with a microphone. "Julian, if you could return to the moment before your wedding, would you still choose Selina?" A piercing question. Selina was about to give a diplomatic answer, but Julian spoke first. "Before the wedding, I chose her for the company. After the wedding, I chose her because I realized I was wrong. She's the only one who never tried to play a role." His eyes never left Selina. That evening, the video of their dance and Julian's response went viral on social media. The hashtag Blackwood Carter began to shift from skepticism to admiration. Posts emerged. "Can a forced marriage blossom?" Selina Carter, from race scandal to humanitarian tech icon. But the atmosphere shifted when they returned to the penthouse after the gala. The door closed and the lights dimmed. Silence. "I know part of what you said was true," Selina said, taking off her earrings. "But I don't know how much." Julian looked at her, not denying it. "I'm confused too. We started this for a purpose. But now that emotions are involved, I don't know if I'm still performing or living." Selina stepped closer, standing in front of him. "Then let's redefine it. Not real or fake. Let's be allies with the right to be vulnerable." Julian nodded. "And if one day we truly fall in love, then we'll know it without needing to act." In the quiet darkness of the room, they didn't kiss. They didn't confess. but their eyes that was real. The slight touch of their hands that was real. The fear that too was real. And in that silence, for the first time since the wedding, they were no longer just cohabiting partners, but two souls standing at the fragile threshold between trust wounds and a longing for something greater than strategy. Blackwood Global Headquarters, Q3. Shareholders' Meeting Room. The air on the 42nd floor was thick, as if everyone were holding their breath. The ceiling lights were glaring, and a CNBC Business Live camera was pointed directly at the executive table where Julian Blackwood and Selina Carter sat. On their left sat Donovan Blackwood, Julian's father, a rigid legend of Wall Street. On their right was Franklin Carter, Selina's father, a man who once claimed to be a disruptive entrepreneur, but was in truth a master manipulator. Behind them, a screen displayed the bold headline, Q4 Strategic Outlook Innovation and Social Responsibility Applications. Selina stepped up to the podium. She wore a navy blue suit, her hair neatly tied back, and held the clicker to control the slides. The presentation showed blueprints and financials for a project using AI to help people with disabilities improve communication and mobility, a project she and her team had developed over 18 quiet, persistent months. This project, she spoke clearly, is not just a piece of technology. It is our responsibility to the society that technology is shaping. Some younger shareholders nodded in agreement, but within seconds, Donovan cut in. A charity product with no profit margin does not belong in the Q4 growth strategy. All eyes turned toward him. Selina froze momentarily. Franklin Carter, with a mocking tone, added, "You should learn to develop projects that make money, not ones that make you feel righteous." Julian stood up. "This project has commercial potential. Market data shows a growing user base, and socially responsible investment redirects capital. Selina has a vision this board is underestimating." Franklin sneered. "Oh, looks like you've become your wife's spokesman now." Julian didn't back down. "I'm the CEO, and I understand the direction the outside world is heading." Suddenly, a major shareholder, Ms. Helena Crane, head of a sustainable tech, raised her hand to speak. "I want to know why a leading humanitarian tech initiative is being dismissed by people who pride themselves on being pioneers." She turned to Selina. "Do you have specific figures on the product's commercial potential?" Selina remained composed. "Yes. The projected net profit after tax in the first year is $6 million, with a compound annual growth rate of 30% over the next 3 years. More importantly, this is the only product this quarter to receive 3 awards for innovation in medical technology." The boardroom buzzed. A young investment advisor raised his hand. "Honestly, we invested because of the image of a young duo revolutionizing the market. We'll pull our funding if you drag this company back to old models." That statement landed like a bombshell. Both Donovan and Franklin stiffened. Outside the meeting room, news headlines broke in real time. Investors threatened to withdraw if Blackwood Global resists innovation. Selina Carter responds powerfully to the board. After the meeting in the backstage hallway, Donovan approached Julian. "You're letting emotions guide you. This company isn't a stage for you two to perform moral theater." Julian replied, calm but sharp. "No, I'm letting reason lead. You're the one being driven by fear of change." Franklin passed by Selina, tossing out a remark. "You're gambling your whole career on some humanitarian PR stunt." Selina smiled. "I'm not doing PR. I'm rebuilding the values you both destroyed." Back at the office, Selina sat beside Marcus and Nadine. She exhaled deeply, her eyes glowing. For the first time, they couldn't silence the voice of a new generation. In the private elevator, Julian held Selina's hand. "I don't know what's coming next, but today, I'm proud of you." She looked at him and softly replied, "And I believe from today onward, we're no longer just rebellious youth. We are the new voice of a collapsing old world." Monday morning. Blackwood Global Headquarters, 6:45 a.m. A flurry of urgent emails began flooding Julian's phone, even before he got out of bed. Urgent. Page 6. Leak. Crisis team mobilized. BuzzFeed CEO. Julian's secret past. Selina was already seated in front of her laptop in the penthouse living room, her face cold as ice. On the screen was an old photo of Julian at age 28, holding hands with a white model, the same template used to replace her in the marriage scheme. The photo had resurfaced accompanied by a glaring red headline, Blackwood CEO caught between two Selinas. 7:10 a.m. CNN begins live coverage. Breaking news. Blackwood Global shares have just dropped 3.2% at market open, as rumors of a strategic marriage and potential internal rift between Julian Blackwood and Selina Carter spread across social media. Some major investors are calling for an emergency meeting. 8:30 a.m. Emergency Communications Office. Marcus Chen, Julian's lawyer and close friend, slammed his hand on the conference table. If you two don't speak up today, this won't just be a media scandal, it'll become a fatal blow to the trust structure of both Blackwood and Carter Tech. Nadine, Selina's communications secretary, breathed heavily. Successful women of color are always targets when deemed unworthy. They're dragging Selina back to the position of the brown girl mistakenly chosen. Julian looked at Selina. She remained silent, her eyes dry, but burning with anger. "We have to do something," he said. "I won't let you be defamed because of my past." 11:00 a.m. Julian Blackwood appears on CNN Prime Business, dressed in a black suit, eyes steely. Julian looked straight into the camera. "I'm aware of what's circulating out there, about an old photo, about divorce rumors, and I have only one response. There is no divorce. No deceit. The only choice. I chose Selina Carter not because of a contract, not because of my father, not because of a merger. I chose her because she's the only one who dared to speak the truth in a room full of liars. And if anyone thinks I'll abandon the smartest woman I've ever met, then they understand nothing about me, and even less about the future Blackwood Global is heading toward." 12:45 p.m. Hashtag I stand with. Selina climbs to #1 globally on Twitter. The media shifts tone. Forbes publishes a CEO who dares to face the storm and not abandon his ally. Vogue Business dubs Selina the woman hurt by the truth, but unbowed by lies. 3:00 p.m. Stock partially recovers, up 2.1%. Some small investors launch support campaigns. 6:30 p.m. At the private apartment, as things settle, Julian pours 2 glasses of wine, handing one to Selina. She smiles slightly. "You just dismantled the PR team's silent strategy." Julian looks at her gently clinking glasses. "Strategy is never more important than the truth, and you are more important than everything." She rests her head on his shoulder, whispering, "I used to think you were part of this cage, but maybe you're the first one who wants to break it open." 8:00 p.m. Marcus sends a message. "The crisis has been contained, but it's time you two need to play a bigger game. And I know where to start: the old cabin. There's something your father hid there, Selina." She glances at Julian. His eyes meet hers. "Let's go. Tomorrow." A day that seemed like an ending, instead, opens a gateway to a hidden past and a future they will redefine together. Mountain Cabin. 10:32 a.m. The next day. The mountain sky was brilliantly blue, but the air inside the wooden cabin was thick, heavy with something that had gone unsaid for decades. Julian carefully opened an old drawer beneath a rickety wooden table, one his father used to visit alone every winter. Selina stood quietly, watching gently, touching a rusted metal box hidden behind old architectural notebooks. "This is it," she whispered. On the box's surface, faded handwriting read, "Do not open unless you truly want to know the truth." Julian glanced at her. They nodded. It was a slight nod that carried the weight of an entire legacy. Inside, a bundle of handwritten letters, rough sketches, and a faded black and white photo. In the photo, two young men, one white, one black, are standing at a construction site holding a design for a wearable tech device to support people with disabilities. The caption, nearly erased, read, "Jonah Blackwood and Elijah Carter, 1981, Project Helix Launch Day." Selina froze. "That's my grandfather. Elijah." Julian squeezed her shoulder. "And that's my grandfather Jonah, the man my father always called the foundation builder. But he never once mentioned Elijah." The first letter, dated September 14, 1983, was handwritten by Jonah Blackwood, Elijah. "I cannot sign the resolution to dismantle Project Helix. We started with a dream technology for the underserved, but the board doesn't accept compassion that doesn't turn a profit. I was forced to choose between you and the company. I chose the company. And that is the decision I will regret until my last day. If someday our descendants are given a chance to right this wrong, I hope they choose the path we didn't dare to take, even if it shakes the very empire we built with blood and blind faith." Selina's hands trembled. The second letter was Elijah Carter's reply, sent weeks later. "Jonah, I understand why you stepped back. I don't blame you, but I can't let Project Helix die. I'll break away and start Carter Tech, not to prove I was right, but to preserve a sliver of hope that technology can still take the shape of human kindness. And if one day our grandchildren stand side by side, I hope they won't be rivals like their parents, but the ones who repair a stolen dream. With all the brotherhood I once shared with you, Elijah." 2:11 p.m. The cabin falls into silence. Julian leaned both hands on the table. His eyes were red. "My father spent his life teaching me that my grandfather was a symbol of strength. But it turns out, he was a man haunted by remorse until the end." He turned to Selina. "And we are the last missing piece of the apology he never got to say." Selina's voice cracked. "We're not the result of a forced marriage. We're the continuation of an unfinished promise." 9:00 p.m. The Financial Chronicle newsroom. Marcus Chen sent an email to a veteran journalist. "I have a document more valuable than any scandal you've ever published. But I'll only send it if you promise to tell the story truthfully, no embellishments, no mockery." The next morning, the Financial Chronicle front page. Truth unearthed. The split between two founders and the redemption journey of their descendants. With a photo of Jonah Blackwood and Elijah Carter and excerpts from their letters. Public reaction. Bloomberg. "If true, this marks the greatest history rewrite in the tech world in over 50 years. Twitter exploded with hashtags, #HelixLegacy, and #Build the Dream Again. A wave of next-gen investors demanded that Julian and Selina present their Helix revival plan at the upcoming merger conference. Julian looked at Selina in their office, not as Blackwood's CEO and Carter Tech's director, but as two heirs to a shared mission. It's time, not just to take back the company, but to reclaim the dream. Selina gripped his hand tightly. "We're not here to change the future. We're here to restore what the future should have always been." Blackwood headquarters, joint boardroom, 47th floor, 9:20 a.m. The 47th floor, once reserved solely for routine shareholder meetings, had now become the focal point of the global financial market. Major outlets like Bloomberg, Forbes, and The Verge had pitched tents outside. A massive LED screen in the lobby displayed the headline, "Historic Merger Meeting, Blackwood and Carter." Selina and Julian entered, dressed in deep navy suits, the new brand color of the proposed future conglomerate, Carter Blackwood Innovations. This was no longer a corporate marriage, but a rebirth from the roots. 9:14 a.m. The meeting begins. Two rows of seats faced each other. Blackwood Global's board of directors on the left, Carter Technologies board on the right. At the center stood the presentation podium. A spotlight lit up the screen, where a new symbol appeared, two interwoven circles representing technology and humanity. Donovan Blackwood, Julian's father, was the first to speak. "I don't understand why we're even here. Blackwood holds the advantage. Why should we change the name, restructure, and merge with a smaller company?" Franklin. Carter smirked. "Perhaps because that smaller company has an R&D team that developed the Helix project, which is now being called for revival by the global disability community." A middle-aged board member, Mrs. Teresa Lim, spoke up, clearly irritated. "You make inspiring speeches, but we need data." Selina stepped forward, the spotlight shifted. "I'm Selina Carter, and this is my project from my grandfather's vision buried by decades of profit optimization policies." She clicked through the slides. Images appeared. A young boy with an amputated arm using an old Helix wrist device to hold a pen. A blind single mother uses a voice sensor to operate her phone. 230% profit growth in developing countries tied to the project. We're not just creating a product. We're liberating lives. The room was utterly silent. Julian stepped beside her, his voice firm. "It's time to stop using power to bury mistakes. We are proposing a full merger. Carter Blackwood Innovations with shared leadership, an equal board, and a social tech fund managed by the very users of our technologies." Donovan slammed the table. "This is a coup. What gives you the right?" Selina tossed a file onto the table. "Proxy votes. 54% of Blackwood's shares are now in Julian's hands. 62% of Carter's are in mine. The shareholders chose renewal, not rhetoric." 10:03 a.m. Voting begins. Each board member raised a placard or tapped their shareholder code into their tablets. Teresa Lim. In favor, Mr. Shoji, representative of Japanese investors. In favor, Marcus Chen, legal counsel representing young shareholders. In favor. Julian turned toward his father. Donovan remained still. "You can still stand on the right side of this," Julian said quietly. Donovan smirked and stayed silent. Results displayed on screen: 78%. Approve, 18%. Reject, 4%. Abstain. Carter Blackwood. Innovations was officially approved. 10:19 a.m. Press floods in. The company's spokesperson announced on camera, "Starting today, Carter Blackwood Innovations is officially launched with a new business philosophy: humanitarian technology. Our goal is no longer just profit, but to serve people." That evening, rooftop of the new building, Julian and Selina stood side by side looking over the radiant city. "We just rewrote history," Julian whispered. Selina nodded, with an old dream and a new choice. The rooftop of the new headquarters, Carter Blackwood Innovations. 1 year later, amid a city transforming, after a year of upheaval, the rooftop on the 60th floor of Carter Blackwood Innovations was like an oasis. Warm yellow lights lined the stone path leading to a small garden known only to a few. No reporters, no shareholders, just Julian and Selina. A soft breeze carried the scent of lavender, the same lavender Selina planted her first day working here. She wore a deep violet satin dress, proud but straightforward. Julian stood by the glass wall, one hand in his pocket, eyes scanning the city below. "Remember the first time you stood here?" Julian spoke, his voice light as mist. "Back when the building didn't even have a name." Selina smiled. "I remember. I thought I was just a pawn my father had moved into place. I never imagined I'd stand here with you and not be afraid anymore." He turned around. In his hand was a velvet box. But this time, it wasn't an obligation, not inheritance, not for the press. He got down on one knee. There were no fireworks, no MC, but the wind seemed to stop. "Selina Carter. The first time we got married, it was arranged. I didn't even know your real name. I thought you were part of a power play. But over the past year, you've fought beside me, built with me, defended what my father once called naive idealism. Through tense meetings, dinners, sketching design plans, and those mornings when your coffee tasted saltier than seawater, I realized that no one makes me feel human like you do. Selina stayed silent. Her eyes brimmed. Julian opened the box. The ring wasn't as flashy as the original Blackwood heirloom, a deep blue sapphire encircled by a band of tiny diamonds, carved into a DNA helix, their shared symbol of technology in service of humanity. This time, not for our parents, not for the media, not for the shareholders. I'm asking because I love you, the real you. No edits, no veil. You don't have to say yes. Just wear it and that's enough. Selina nodded, silently, then spoke, almost breaking Julian. I used to think love was a luxury in this world. Then you showed up a stranger at first, and ended up the only one who could look me in the eye without bowing to prejudice. If I know one thing for sure, it's this. I don't want to stand at the top of all this alone. I want to be here with you. She held out her hand. The ring slid perfectly onto her finger. Behind them, the city lights dimmed, making space for the stars. Below, hundreds of employees celebrated the company's first anniversary. None of them knew that on the top floor, the CEO and Chief Creative Officer had just started a new chapter, not as strategic partners, but as life partners. At the celebration downstairs, minutes later, fireworks unexpectedly lit the sky, not company-sponsored but secretly arranged by Marcus Chen, Julian's friend and attorney. He winked playfully when he saw the newly united couple descend, hand in hand. Finally, real, huh? Marcus asked. Julian nodded. Selina squeezed his hand tighter. Not an end. A beginning. Headlines the next day read, Julian Blackwood reproposes to his wife. 1 year after arranged marriage, a modern love declaration. Selina Carter, from misrepresented bride to CEO. Redefining human-centered technology. On social media, millions shared a clip Marcus had casually captured with a mini drone. Julian kissing Selina's forehead under fireworks, his voice clear. We were forced to marry. But now I choose to love you. Every day. International Hospital. An early spring morning. Sunlight filtered through the postpartum room window, illuminating the tiny face of baby Eleanor Rose Blackwood Carter. Her eyes shut tight, hands gently waving in the air, lips softly murmuring, as if singing her own tune. Selina looked at her daughter, peace shining in her eyes after a long journey. Julian sat beside the bed, her hand resting gently in his, the sapphire engagement ring glinting on her finger. She's named after two strong women, Eleanor Stone and Rose Carter, Selina whispered. One silently supported our choice. One walked away from a marriage to raise her daughter in freedom. Julian said nothing. He leaned in and kissed his daughter's forehead like offering a silent vow. You won't carry a name for legacy. You'll carry it to choose your path. 3 months later, Carter Blackwood Innovations main hall. The entire world of tech finance and media gathered for the launch of the Eleanor Rose Foundation, an independent organization dedicated to funding research and development in assistive technologies for the vulnerable people with disabilities, orphans, and older people. What set it apart, 50% of the foundation's board comprised people who use assistive tech because no one represents them better than they do themselves. On stage, Selina stood beside Julian, the new symbol behind them, a double helix DNA, interwoven in purple and blue, representing human-centered innovation. We didn't start this foundation out of pity. We started it because we believe every scientific advancement only holds value when it places humanity at its core. The audience applauded not merely for the couple's generosity, but because they had redefined what success meant in the 21st century. That evening, A penthouse overlooking the city. Eleanor slept peacefully in a smart bassinet with adaptive sound and soothing lights, part of Selina's smart care project for newborns. Julian poured 2 cups of tea. They sat together in armchairs watching their daughter through the glass. "I used to think my life was pre-programmed," he said. "Educated to fit a mold. I love who my parents chose. Marry to boost stock prices." Selina rested her head on his shoulder. "And I used to think I had to fight alone my entire life. But then we found each other in the middle of that very battle." She smiled softly. The press called them the couple who redefined arranged marriage. Business schools began using the Carter-Blackwood model as a case study in non-combative power restructuring through next-gen collaboration. Social media carried the company's new slogan, "Far and Wide, from Inheritance to Innovation." 1 year later, in a high-tech integrated preschool, little Eleanor Rose mumbled her first words in front of a classroom camera. Not because her parents were CEOs, not because she was born to icons of a generation, but because she lived in a world where people, not assets, were the foundation of everything. Julian and Selina stood behind the glass, hand in hand. No more weight of a performative wedding. No more pretending at galas. Just 2 souls who had chosen each other and a shared purpose. "I think we've truly rewritten the definition of family," Selina said. Julian smiled. "Not just family. A legacy." The final scene. National television exclusive interview. "If you could return to the wedding day, what would you change, Selina?" "I wouldn't wear the veil. I'd look Julian in the eye from the very start and say, we may have been forced to begin, but from now on, every step we take will be our own choice." And just like that, from a wedding born of deception, a child named after 2 proud generations of women, and a company reborn, not from capital, but from conviction, Julian and Selina did what few had ever dared. They transformed an arranged marriage into a manifesto for living a new philosophy of technology and a love that was entirely, irrevocably real.